Welcome to Slim Nation's One-on-One podcast with conversations featuring the host, James Slim Overton.
Welcome everybody to the Slim Nation One-on-Ones podcast. James Slim Overton here, and I'm here with a special guest, Louis Bracy, and he's from the Truxton neighborhood. We grew up together. We graduated in 1972, IC Norcom, so we've been friends for a long time, forever. Uh, he moved out of the area. After high school, a lot of us went different ways. I went to college, and but every once in a while he would come home. I remember one football game when they still had Frank DeLorean Stadium. We uh, we got together and set up in the stands and talked during the whole game
Yeah, we
because
did.
we hadn't seen each other in a while, so we had to catch up. But good morning, Louis. How you doing?
I'm fine. Good morning to you. How's your family?
They doing great. And Lewis is not a stranger to us. He's been on our other show, which is called Ports and Coffee Talk, which we talk a lot of politics, and we have a lot of other hosts and co-hosts on there. But I wanted to have Lewis on the One-on-Ones podcast, which uh, like I do with many people, so we can have that conversation. And when you see him pop up on Ports and Coffee Talk, you know a little bit more about Brother Lewis there. But anyway, Lewis, I think we were, yeah, I mean, we were in that class of 72, and there's a lot of talk about that class. We had a boycott during that year. Uh, it was in the 70s, not the 60s, but they sicked the dogs on some students,
They did too. They
you know,
did.
that were protesting. And we got the word that they were either taking the name or trying to close the schools like they were doing to a lot of the black high schools. And so that's what we were protesting. We actually had Ben Chavis, who is nationally known now. He was nationally known then as one of the Wilmington Seven, what they were going through in North Carolina. But he came down and stood with us for a
Yeah.
day, and so brought some more attention. And it got a lot of attention nationally and especially locally. And of course, they didn't do what they said they were going to do, but it ended up, you know, being a good program there uh, after we left, because they had a lot of trades, and for a while you had to apply if you want zone for Norcom, you had to apply to go
Hmm.
there. You had to have a certain average, and then they had nursing programs and things like that, and turned out to be pretty good for people that were not going to go to college, which was a lot of people. Everybody's not college bound or college material. So most people, and you need the skilled labor that they were learning there at Norcom at the time. So, what did you do right after graduation?
Well, I want to mention something quick about Ben Chavis. He ended up being president of the NAACP,
Yeah.
and this is here in Baltimore. And I met him several times over the years, before he left the office. And
Did he remember coming down to Norcom during
he
that time?
absolutely did. He remember Sweet Wolf.
Yeah. Who could forget? Yeah.
He remember the church. They used to have the meetings at St. Mark's in
Yeah.
Truxton,
Yeah.
right? And I just wanted to say that he remembers every single detail of that event when I talked to him at that time. So I wanted to say that. Uh, but as I mentioned earlier, like you said, most of us went different directions. We were talking last night, and I always tell people the funny story. You mentioned how me and James G was always connected at the hips,
Yeah.
and I always tell the story that he had went and signed up to join the military. He didn't tell me, you know. So
Oh
I said,
yeah.
and then I
And
said, you
y'all
ain't
told
going
her.
about me. because I had no intention of joining the military because the Vietnam was still going on.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was I was against the war and still am. But I looked at it. A Marine say something to me that was interesting. He said, "You don't go and join the service. You don't go to war for people. You go to war for a friend." And he said, "If your friend is going, he your friend, you should go to protect him." And that made a lot of sense at that time for some reason. So when he told me to sign up, I was there the next day. And so that's how I ended up in the military, and then following James G.
Yeah, I remember that because during those times, a lot of guys they had a buddy program. A lot of guys was going in there and doing the buddy program. What I heard, and a lot of them, and it's supposed to kept them together while they were in there. But a lot of them got in that buddy program and they got shipped off to different things. But because a lot of guys, when I was up in Richmond, you had to go to Richmond before you were shipped out. And some of the guys, I was in the White Tower one early morning, and all these guys came from, it was, about 5 guys from Norcom up there to sign in to go to, in the military. And they just happened to walk in the White Tower that night. And I was sitting in there with another friend of mine that was a basketball player at Union. And I took him back to the campus, and we, before they got shipped off, so a lot of guys went in there as buddies. And well, when you went in, after G went in, did you all run into each other during your career?
They kept that word on the buddy thing, because I got a lot of funny stories. Because we went to basic together, we ended up in AIT together, and we went into military intelligence, and we were doing the Morse code.
Oh, okay.
James passed, I didn't. so he passed it. What we were doing then, it was called, it was Morse code, what we call ditties. And that's how we got separated, because he went on, and then if you don't pass the thing, they give you something else, and they ain't gonna let you out. Mm-hmm. So I ended up going to Fort Jackson, and he ended up going to a base in Indiana, and we still stayed connected until he went to Korea. That was the only time we ever been separated. I was assigned to Germany, and then he was assigned to Korea, and he ended up coming back. He got out after his 3 years. Then he went to Norfolk State and became an officer. And we still, like I say, but we never been, except for that time when he was in Korea, we never been separated.
Wow, that's amazing. We had, you had it was a group of us, but then you had certain guys that were real tight, and you all were tight from the neighborhood. If you saw Lewis, you saw James G.
Right.
And it was amazing during those times that we all graduated, and we had the high school fraternity. I tell people it was several high school fraternities. Like it was the diplomats, the executives, and I think the ambassadors. And I think one of the reasons you were one of the original members, one of the reasons we started Imperials, we wanted to do our own thing.
That's right.
And it gained traction, man. We would meet at each other's houses, and I think it was a good thing because it kept a lot of us, because we would meet and we tried to do activities. We had dances and we tried to. I remember one time we tried to walk through the neighborhoods and sing carols. I think people call the police. No, I don't think they call the police. But then we got a sister group called the Imperialettes, and we would get together with them. And it was just a fun time, and I think we were a group with a purpose. We wanted to have a good time, and I think our initiations, we would take people out to the graveyard called Fisher's Hill, and if you could stand there, I remember one time we were out there, we took some the potential members out there to scare them, and we heard a sound, and everybody else took off. But there were some good days. But I think that group, kept a lot of us out of trouble. we didn't have a lot of idle time because it was always something we were trying to do. And
That's right.
it's a matter of just getting together, and we see each other say, "I Psi E, Imperial Psi Epsilon." We never did get our sweaters, but we talked about it.
You know what? That's right. We never did do that.
Yeah, we talked about it, but it was just one of those things. I remember somebody made us. Remember that somebody made us in shop a big eye.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah, I kept it. I took that eye with me for my first tour of duty,
Yeah, yeah,
and
had
then
the big eye we
away,
wear around our neck. It was
it
huge.
was my baggage on when I came back to America some kind of way. It wasn't there.
Yeah,
I don't
and
know if somebody
and
went in
I
my bag and stole it, but I had that eye thing for a long time.
yeah, I know. I had mine for a while, but moving around, you lose things. But I still, right up here, I can't get to it, but I still have my paddle that says Imperial. And back in those days, they call me Slim now, but growing up in the neighborhood, everybody called me Anthony. So my nickname in the Imperials was Ant. You know,
Hmm.
and it's amazing it was Ant. And I was I wasn't exactly 6'5" like I am now, but I was taller than everybody else. But they called me Ant or either a Big O. But that and another thing I wanted to bring up about the neighborhood. You remember the station wagon you had?
A chugga boom.
Yeah, he had a now. It was an old station wagon, but yeah, that was a prize. When you were mostly walking. Now I could get my parents' car, but every once in a while, but that I had to get it for something. And you got that station wagon. We all load up in there. Look, and be about seven of us in the station wagon. We pull up to the service station and order 25 cents worth of gas. And back then, when you pull up to the service station, they come out there, they wipe your windows and check your oil and do all that stuff. That's why they called it a service station back then.
That's right.
And the guy came out there and did all that stuff, and all we got was like 25 or 50 cents worth of gas, and seven of us in the car, and that's all we had was 25 cents. But it was 20. Gas was 25 cents a gallon back then,
And that's all
so
we need. That's
that's
all
all
you
we
need.
needed to get where we were going, because we would challenge other high school fraternities in football games, and the biggest game that I think we had to walk away from. It was a group called the Black Bishops,
Oh wow! I
and they
forgot
were
about
yeah, and they were, and I think one meeting you said, "Oh yeah, I scheduled a game with us and the Black Bishops." Everybody looked at each other and said, "Well, we got to show up, because you can't not show up when you have a challenge like that." But we got out there; those guys came with helmets, cleats, and most of them were on the football team. And we said, we played everybody else that we challenged, but we said, no, I mean, we out there with nothing. And they come like they were playing in the NFL.
That's right.
And they were already, you know, kind of rough around the edges. That's why they were the Black Bishops.
Yeah, I say they're a bunch of grown men.
Yeah.
We were
Excuse
a
me.
bunch of grown men. Some of the guys had mustaches and growing beards
Growing
almost.
beards, yeah. We still had peach fuzz.
Yeah,
But
peach fuzz.
yeah, but that was some of the days that we had and coming up and Lewis, as I'll let you talk, but as you think about the crime now and some of the young people involved and all the shootings, we shooting each other, and don't like to use the black on black crime because it's white on white crime too, which is or Asian on Asian crime, but stuff was going on back then too, but the only difference was in most cases, we knew who the thugs were. I mean, we knew who carried the guns. So if we were at a party and that guy walked in, we said, okay, be on guard. There's going to be some trouble because those guys, trouble followed them around. But nowadays, you don't know, you got an innocent looking guy that looks like he's, you know, is about 12 years old and he's gun toting. I mean, he
Yeah,
has a gun and he might kill you because he has no respect for his life, so he's not going to respect yours. And
No.
that's the big difference. Because I tell people, things always been going on in Portsmouth, but it was just a different uh, environment back there. We kind of knew where the trouble was and where it was going to come from.
You say what I always tell people locally. I said, we was coming up, you always know who the bad guys were.
Mhm.
You know who the families were. And you know when they did something, you know where the cops were always going to end up being.
Right.
and like you say, it wasn't that things weren't going on then. It just weren't going on at nowhere near the volume that we see today. And when you talk about these kids, especially up in Baltimore, I'm right between Baltimore and DC.
Mhm.
I hear the bad stuff every single day. And I do mean every single day. There's not a day that goes by where someone in Baltimore is not being shot.
Yeah.
In DC is every other day. But
It's
in
pretty much
Baltimore,
like that here.
somebody's being shot. And it hasn't been a day this year where someone hadn't been shot or shot at. And the ages is what always kills me. Like you say, it's going to be from 12 to 18. And these are kids that you and I know, if they didn't have a gun, they wouldn't do nothing.
Yeah.
I always tell people, all we have is a bunch of punk ass wannabe thugs.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these people who are in these alleged gangs, they don't really know what a gang is. Like back in the Chicago, when they started the Chicago gang, the Bloods and Crips,
Mm-hmm.
13, people like that, those are real gangs. What we see is just a bunch of wannabe thugs. That's what you see in Baltimore. They have these groups called the Black Guerrillas that runs the prisons here. And they do run the streets, and they are bad. But half of them in prison. And now you got these other people trying to reclaim their territory, and they, while they're in prison. And so they killing each other over drugs and territory. And what I always tell people, the sickest thing to me is, oh, you from the east side, I'm from the west side, and so we're gonna kill each other, and don't none of us own no property. How silly is that?
Right.
But what I want to say to them, I'm gonna close on that part, is that the biggest problem that I see in our community today is that you have babies raising babies.
Mm-hmm.
You have people who have kids who weren't raised themselves, then they have kids, and since they weren't raised, they don't know how to raise their kids. Classic example of what just happened here last Friday. You had a mother going into school with a gun, with a 14-year-old son with a gun, to start a fight with another kid with a gun. And they end up having a gun battle right at the school. Now this is not the first time it happened. This is like the 15th or 16th time that a so-called parent have went to school to confront another student with a gun. Now, that is like, what kind of parent does that? What kind of parent does that? And you hear all these excuses. Oh, we told the principal and the principal didn't do nothing about it. They always come back to some kind of bullying. And that's the excuses that these people are using right now. This person kept messing with my son. We kept calling the school wouldn't do nothing to them, so I took care of it on my own. Please, you got other options. You have other options. You don't have to do that. And in Baltimore, unfortunately, and in DC, and I go to Philly sometimes too, you hear the same damn story all the time. And when you go and talk to the parents, like I've done, we used to have this group here. It was like a neighborhood courts, mm-hmm. where we try to do preventative actions to stop kids from going into the criminal justice system. And when you make the parents, you see why the kids are so messed up. And I always say the problem in our community has been, of course, drugs. And then you have these crack babies, either crack mamas and crack daddies having crack babies. And any medical person to tell you how drugs affect an infant while it's in the womb. And at one time in Baltimore, they say that I think it was a 5-year period, they had something like 50,000 crack babies born. Same thing in Philadelphia. And anybody on this show who listens, they can check up this. I always tell people, don't believe a word that I say. Do your own research.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have our society, if you have that many people, now keep in mind, I'm talking about just 3 areas: Baltimore, DC, Philadelphia. Everybody know when the crack epidemic started, and then you can see when that epidemic started, the rise in black on black murders from the day one. And you can go back. Ronald Reagan had a lot to do with it when you talk about politics, but that's a whole nother subject. Mm-hmm. Go back to when crack cocaine entered LA. And you go anywhere in America and you look at the death rates, the black on black death rates, and you can just count every year it went up. Every year it went up. And so that is what we are facing now. We're facing what the results of crack cocaine being thrown into our community. Then you have the people who use the crack having babies, and then those babies having babies, and no one is raising anyone. And we got to turn up here. We call them free range kids, like free range chickens. Mm-hmm. And I don't like it, but that's what you see. You see a lot of kids out here today. Like they had a big thing. Did you hear about the squeegee issue up here? The squeegee murder?
No.
Well, here they had called squeegee kids, where they go out to try to wipe your windows, and nobody wants it done in the first place. So we just had a case recently where one of the squeegee kids brought a gun. They broke off this guy's wipers because he didn't want no service. Mm. They ripped his stuff off, so he came back with a baseball bat. But then one of the squeegee kids pulled out a gun, and not only did he shoot him, he chased him and shot him. And people try to justify, well, he had a baseball bat. Why is a 14-year-old kid on the corner with a 45, and he's supposed to be working, to gain some chump change to wipe your windows? And they have had multiple cases of that, situation where they should have been in school in the first place, but they're on the streets, what they call squeegee kids.
Yeah.
You look it up. It was very horrific. The case just ended a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And as we many times on the other show, when we have our group discussions, we talked about trying to get to the root of the problems, and it's a lot of different areas where the problems come from. And we talked about our neighborhoods coming up and how different it was. I guess the young kids are exposed to so much more than we were. A lot of things we didn't learn until we went away to college or into service. These guys know this stuff at the age of 7 and up. Things that we weren't exposed to, and then we had that parent support. If your teacher said something about you to your parents automatically believe the teacher.
That's
because they felt like the teacher didn't have no reason to lie on you unless the teacher proved it. It wasn't like the kid first against the students, because we've had those situations here where parents go up and fight the teachers.
That's right.
And that's why they have a hard time filling the teacher vacancies, because the teachers, our teachers, they couldn't put hands on us, but in elementary school, they could put the paddle on us. But in high school, it was just a matter of respect. And when you think about our neighborhoods, the baddest guys in the neighborhood respected the elders. They might have been fighting us every day, but if they walked by an elder, they would speak.
That's right.
I'll be in my front yard now. A guy walked right by me where I could smell his breath and don't say a word.
Don't say a word. Don't say a word. They won't even look at you. Sometimes.
Don't even look at you. I said, how can somebody walk that? Imagine if we walk. You walking down Olmsted and you walk by anybody that's sitting on the porch and you don't say nothing.
Hey, that is true. And, when I have went to funerals of some of our elders who have passed away, like Herbert Town's mother, when
Yeah,
she passed away, and Mr. Johnny down the street, uh, Mr. Green. It didn't matter. If one of those people thought I didn't speak to them, they would call my mother. They'd say, you know what? I saw Lewis on High Street. He ain't say anything.
yeah.
Now, and this is when I'm an adult. This is as an adult.
Hmm.
As a kid, if someone were to say that one of my sisters, or Dee Dee or me, did something, and it would be home before we got there,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
my mother would say in a minute, they don't have no reason to lie on you. Same thing with the teacher. The teacher, but I would say, like all kids, the teacher don't like me. And my mother and father would say, they don't have no reason not to like you. What did you do? It was never a question as to who was right and who was wrong.
yeah, yeah. It was all, if it was a matter of you against an adult or a teacher, you know, the benefit, the benefit went to the adult and the teacher first,
That's
and,
right.
unless it was proved otherwise. They didn't have, and we always had those excuses. And one other thing, before, talking about the neighborhood and the fraternity we had in high school, because I want to talk to you about some things in Baltimore that you've been involved with. But the last thing, because you told me to remind you of this, we would have our meetings at each other's houses, different houses, and
Mm-hmm.
and our parents really supported. I know my dad would support us, because he would let us. He was a member of this Sahib club. He would let us have dances there,
Yes.
and but all the parents, because we went around to different houses and had meetings, and I think the parents appreciate seeing us as young people, even
Trying to.
being serious enough to have a meeting, and we would do it in order, use the as far as we knew Robert's rules of order, we would use that. We have a parliamentary, we had a sergeant at arms that would shut you up if you got out of order. But we had that meeting at your house, and we were talking last night. I said I remember one meeting we had at your house, and your dad had sat right in there with us during the meeting, which
Yeah.
was
And I
unusual.
wanted to tell you, and I bought the book. You just said it. Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah.
Robert's Rules of Order. And I wanted to say that after that meeting, my father, now this is a newer copy, but my father was a Mason and he was an elk.
Right. So he
So,
knew. Yeah.
yeah, so when we had a dispute at that meeting, my father said after the meeting, you can change any bylaws. It's in the Robert Rules of Order. Hear the book. Read the book. Like we talked before, your father would do the same thing. Look it up or read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I always tell people. Don't listen to other people. Do your own research and then come back and talk about it. Don't just assume when somebody tell you something, it's the fact, which is
Right.
why all these crazy people following Donald Trump. They don't research. They don't want to know no facts. They don't want to. They only want to know what they want to know. But
Right. And often we could get in trouble. Even sometimes an expert might say something, and that's fine, and we can trust and go along with that. But just for the sake of yourself and look it up too. Because you might find some extra or get some extra knowledge behind whatever that expert says.
when you say
And
expert,
you don't want to go around quoting a lot of people and be wrong.
I always tell people, what is an expert? And when you look up what the dictionary tells about an expert, is a person who has vast experience over a long period of time. Okay, and sometimes they throw academics in it. But I always tell people that an expert gets his knowledge from other people, just like you would.
Right.
Or he gets his knowledge from independent research.
Yeah, it's
That's
not even though they have studied this and studied that,
right.
it's not coming off the top of his head. It's because when we've had people on the show that might be Dr. something from Norfolk State, we have a lady named Dr. Ernestine Duncan, and she's like a regular guest host. She comes on from time to time, but she's in the Department of Psychology at Norfolk State. So we bring her on a lot when we're talking about mental health issues, or we just want to, talk about human behavior because that's what they study. And before she comes on, when I ask her to come on and tell her what we want to talk about, she does research, even though she used to be the head of that department over there. Even though she has all that, she's a doctor, has a doctorate in that. She researches before she comes on the show. Even though a lot of that she can talk off the top of her head, but in
Mhm.
order for her to make the subject, whatever she's going to talk about, relevant, or uh, to what we're going to talk about, relevant to the day, she still does her research, even though she's been in the field for a long time. And like you said, even experts, you know, they don't just sit on their laurels. When they dealing with something, they do the research. So if the experts do research before they, you know, talk about the topic, what do you think we need to be doing?
That's the point, because like I was talking to a doctor yesterday, and and it had to do with a friend of mine with a medical issue, and I say, have you done the latest research on bombardment? Basically breaking up hard tissue as opposed to cutting it out. They send sound waves in there to break it up instead. And he said, no, I haven't. And then he said, give me a minute. And then he went to his computer and stuff. He said, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'll get back to you after I do some research. Now, this is a doctor who's been in the field for like 30 or 40 years, but he hadn't heard about this new technology. And that's the whole point. Things change, new
Yeah.
things come out. But I want to throw something out before we run out of time about expert, because I know you know who J.A. Rogers is. J.A. Rogers,
Yeah, go ahead.
he used to come, when we had a journal and guide, that you'll always have a section about Black history,
Yeah.
little facts. J.A. Rogers. And I always, whenever I talk to people about experts, I always like to throw this guy's name up there, because he was a Pullman porter. He never went to college, but he traveled all over the world. And his whole point was to prove that we as African Americans were the first in everything, and we have a legacy that happened way before our enslavement in this country. And his whole purpose in life was to prove that Black people were not what white folks wanted everybody to believe, in what we was even taught ourselves. He wanted to prove that we came from a proud people, and we had established many things long before Europeans even came out of the caves. And J.A. Rogers is a person who never went to college, didn't have one degree, but he wrote, I think 5 or 6 books that were challenged at the time, because people say, well, he don't know what he's talking about. He don't have one degree. And he was actually dissed by Black scholars because they didn't believe his facts was accurate. Now, years after he's passed away, virtually every single thing that this man wrote that was in the journal and guide when we was coming up, it was always have a little section in the thing, Black history facts. It would be J.A. Rogers that would be the person who would be the one that would be talking. And
So it's almost like a reference book now.
yeah, and now the things that this man was trying to get people to wake up to back when we was young have all been proven correctly. I'm gonna just use one example, is that Charlotte, North Carolina, they do all those movies, Brigaden and all that stuff, having these Black queens and stuff that everybody say, oh, that never happened.
Mm-hmm.
He told us this happened in the 50s and 60s. That there was that Queen Charlotte, that they named Charlotte, North Carolina after, was Black. Now they admit it. Now here it is, you and I, 70, I'm 70 now. I think.
I will
And
be almost. You know, I got caught in that. You know, my birthday is in September,
yeah,
so I started at 5. Well, a lot of people that had a later birthday had to wait a whole year before they went.
right.
So I'm 69, so I'm knocking on the door.
So you're knocking on the door, but the point I wanted to make was was the fact that this gentleman with no degree had a big impact on me when I was coming up,
Hmm.
given what you call Black consciousness. This is one of the things that he talked about at a time when people really didn't understand what Black consciousness was, and he came about at the perfect time when we had the situation at Norcom. Black consciousness. You remember people used to talk about Black consciousness. That's when it
Yeah,
turned based in the 70s, in the late 60s and 70s, Black consciousness. To understand where it means a lot more than just a simple thing, but it's the most important thing it means is you need to know who you are.
yeah.
You need who you really are. You need to know where your people were, where your people came from, and what they have done.
Yeah, you
And
know, and I'll just jump in here. I talk often when I'm talking about subjects about that early '70s era and the late '60s. That was, you know, a time when a lot of us really discovered our blackness. You know, when I went to Union, we studied certain things when we were at Norcom. You know, everybody knew who Booker T. Washington was, George Washington Carver, and those, nationally known figures. When I got to Union, black religion and black history was mandatory, regardless of what, some classes, regardless of what you majored in. If you were majoring in chemistry, you had to take. And I was amazed, or I learned how how much we contributed as a black race to the formulation of America. A lot of
yes,
stuff we didn't get, and it wasn't the fault of our teachers. They taught what we could, but it wasn't in the curriculum.
mm-mm.
And they taught a lot of things outside the book, but they had to stick pretty much to the curriculum. And a lot of us made those discoveries, excuse me, like you said, during the '70s. You with the journaling guide, that was like a good resource for us. Because we won't. They might have had a section in the Virginia Pilot called the Colored Notes, which was about like this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but the journaling guide kept us up with what was happening in the communities. But even more expanded my mind, and probably when you went in the service, a lot of things that you discovered. Just talking to other people from other areas of the country you know,
Yeah,
and learning about, and that experience just helped us discover our blackness and form us into what we are today, which is one of the reasons I like to do these one-on-ones, because that's why when I started the one-on-ones, I like to go back to the neighborhoods because, and you mentioned it the other day, we have a lot of people that influenced us and we might not have known it then. But as we got older, that seed was planted, and we realized, that guy. And it always didn't have to be a lawyer Overton. It could have been that electrician, Bob Dozier, who used to ride around in our neighborhood um, doing electrician work and stuff like that. And we had a lot of people in our neighborhoods where our neighborhoods could be self-sufficient because we had all these people that had these skills. The Jones buses, Keith Jones' daddy did plastering. You had Mr. Jones that did the plumbing. So we had everything we needed, and we had the people that actually influenced us. And if you think about it today, we looked at these people and were impressed by it. But later on, it ended up shaping us into who we are today. And then couple that with the history that we picked up along the way, it made us a proud race, and we still fighting that fight today.
I'm glad you mentioned the neighborhood and how sufficient. And I mentioned to you when we were talking earlier, when I tell people about our neighborhood and our school and how we saved it, they almost can't believe it until they do the research. And you mentioned because I had this real argument for somebody one day, and I use a lot of French. And I just can't believe that some people are so lost and so disconnected, even to this day, with their own, with what the ability that we have. And when you mentioned our neighborhood was self-sufficient, you laid it right on the nose. We had dentists in our neighborhood. We had doctors in our neighborhood.
Of course, the teachers, plenty of teachers
in our neighborhood. I don't know how many mechanics we had in the neighborhood because, my daddy always say, go down there to Huddle Brown,
yeah.
That live next door to the Casey's,
Yeah, Mr. Griffin
used yard. And if Mr. Brown was busy, you would go around the corner. It was mechanics there. It was plumbers there. It was electricians there. It was TV repairmen there.
Yeah.
Our TV was always repaired by a black man.
Yeah.
And so just in our own neighborhood alone, and don't say you couldn't build anything, because there were people in our neighborhood that knew how to build.
Yeah.
There were people in our neighborhood who knew how to build, because we had the contractors in our neighborhood, the chambers, right? And and then you had the gentleman who did the cabinet.
There was Chisholm.
Yeah, Chisholm, yeah. And the gentleman, and they was related to the gentleman who did the cabinets, who had a shop on Portsmouth Boulevard.
Yeah, Keys.
Yes. So don't say that, that they learned everything from the white man, because they didn't. These were some of those, a lot of hand skills are passed down from father to son like that. But the point I'm just getting to is that when you build a nation, that we always talk about, we always hear these people, all these black nationalists always talk about this nation building and all that kind of stuff, but that's a whole different discussion we can talk about later on another group of people. But the point is, if we had to build a nation, we have everything that we need to build a nation. There's nothing now that you or anybody else can say that we don't have. No one can say we have everything you need. We have scientists. We have astrophysicists. There's nothing on this planet that African Americans in this country, if you were to take the best and brightest of us and put us somewhere else, we will survive, and we will do quite well at it. And it's been proven time and time again. And like I say, when we have time on another, because I've been to the Caribbean multiple times, and a lot of people don't know that in some of these island nations, when all the white folks died off from malaria and things of that nature, when them ships came in, who fixed those ships? Our people did.
Yeah.
And one of the first shipyards back in the day, I'm talking about the 18th century and so, was in the Caribbean. That when the pirates would come come on land, they would be surprised that the first people to walk up and say, well, what kind of repair work you need? Because in them days, ships were getting battered all the time.
Yeah.
You had to come to a dock to fix those things. And who fixed them? Our people.
Yeah.
In Baltimore, yourself, one of the things, Frederick Douglass had worked for a black shipyard owner. That's another story that a lot of people know about Frederick Douglass, but a lot of people don't know that Frederick Douglass worked at a black shipyard to fix ships back in those days. I'm just getting to the point that I just feel like if some of our people who are so lost today, who have absolutely no idea what you and I are talking about right now, they really had parents like we did, who made sure that you went to school, you listened to your elders. Some people have arguments about this, but I think it was very important that we also had a religious foundation. We had we argue about how we was manipulated. That's a whole different conversation. But the point is that when you went to church on Sunday, because you didn't have no choice, you go to church. My mother had them start shirts ready, But it gave you a foundation to the point to know that you are not the only person in this universe, and this universe did not come about by accident. Now you can argue about beliefs, faiths, and all that other kind of stuff, but you get my point. The
Yeah,
point is,
yeah, exactly.
you have to have a solid foundation of a family, and you have to have a solid foundation that there's something greater than you out there. And what we don't see today are people who understand just those basic things. We got people, like I say, the free range parents, the free range kids, they don't know what a family really is. They don't. They have no idea what a family, how you can have a family and know what a family is when you don't even know who your father is. How many people have you met who have never met their father?
Lately, a lot, and you know, and even when you talk about that, and we winding down now, but even when you talk about that, you know, when we were growing up, if it wasn't a father in the house, it was because his wife was widowed. In most cases,
Yep.
most of the houses, and I'm talking about Truxton, and Truxton sort of reflected a lot of different communities, the black communities in the area. Even if you go into the what we call the projects, or the government homes like Lincoln Park and things like that, there were fathers there, but as time went on, the system sort of weeded out the fathers. They made it hard for fathers to even be there because, or men to be there. But I can remember going out in Lincoln Park, and just about most of those houses had a father in them too. And it wasn't like, it became later that it was no fathers in those situations. But in Truxton, I mean, there was a father in every house. Whether he was a good father or not, I mean, that
Oh,
that
bad
might be
part.
questioned. But he was there, and he was
Alcoholic.
he was providing. He might have stayed at the shot house, but he was bringing that home first, and then going to the shot house. But he's making those groceries every 2 weeks.
And you know what? I tell people, this is another thing I tell people because, I dated uh, ladies that lived in the Lincoln Park, and I dated ladies that lived
Cavalier Manor.
called, then it was subsidized housing and on welfare. And I always tell them that even if it was a single mother there, she was a strong single mother, didn't take no crap from the
Right,
kids. You
right,
know, like the last lady that I dated before I graduated, she had 4 kids, but it was all 4 kids from the same man. They weren't 4 kids from 4 different people.
right.
And what I tell people now, 'cause I know you said we winding down, because I told you we weren't going to have enough time yesterday.
Yeah, well,
But
I knew that too. I mean, this is going to be a ongoing
yeah,
conversation, but because, and I wanted to start with you, with in the neighborhood, because you brought up something too that I think we can devote a whole show to. The people, when you brought up that J.A. Rogers or Pullman, and it made me think about A. Philip Randolph, who was also a Pullman that pulled a lot
mhm,
of that together along with everybody else. And people need to know, that don't know, how significant those Pullmans were, because they
yeah,
traveled the country, and they were organized, and they were financially organized, sending kids to college and things like that. So people need to know the history of them. I mean, they were really significant as far as making their mark, or making ways for black people, because they had, they were making that money, and they were traveling the country. And although, they had to be like they were somewhere, but they were some very intelligent and smart
they're
men.
very intelligent, and they were threatened with death every single day.
Yeah,
And this was before, like, anybody can pick up these phones now and do it. But in them days, some depending upon where you're at, you still had those phone systems where the lady had to plug you in, and they were
yeah,
still sending death threats.
yeah,
And then they would come. Some of them white folks were so evil, they would come hundreds of miles just to give you a death threat, just to be there waving a stick or whatever, waving a back, or letting you know they got a gun in the back of the car. And those Pullman porters, they put up with hell. I don't know if you saw the movie that they did on them, with the movie that they did, but if you haven't, you check out the movie that they did. A. Philip Randolph, Rock Dutton is one of the people that was in the movie. It'd be nice if you could check that. If you haven't checked it out, do check it out.
I think I have seen it, but
It's just so
something
interesting
I like to
that
see it again.
I don't think we can. I think we could talk 5 or 6 hours and
About them.
never be finished.
Right.
You know, there's so much to cover. But I want to just finish up that one last point I wanted to say about it about having people that are a father and a mother in a home is that I guess running, we below. Do you remember the report that was done by Senator Patrick Moynihan? Did you ever read the Moynihan report?
No, but everything you're saying, if I haven't, I'm writing down now
Yeah,
to
well, the
follow up.
Moynihan report, at that time, it was 60% of the household African Americans had a black man in the household in the 60s. Now that we're below 50%. I think it's 47% of African American males in the home now.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing I want to say, because if you look at that right there, you can see why we're having all these problems on the streets today. When you have less than 50% of a home occupied by a strong African American male who's doing the right thing now, you're bound to be more successful. Now, if we were bad by conventional standards in the 60s and the early 70s, with 66% of African American males in a home, and that was considered bad. Where are we at now when we're less than 50%? I believe it's 47 to 48% now. That tells you right there where we are as an African American society in the United States of America today. And until we get the family back together, we will never get the community back together. If we don't get the community back together, I don't know what's going to happen. And that's all I have to say at the moment.
Yeah, and I'll end this with, you remember the Patterson family? It must have been about 19 of them, but it was the father and the mother in the household. And we had a bunch of families throughout the neighborhood. The Falks, they had about 12. The Rays that live around here was about 13 of them. I used to always wonder, even how many. It was what, 5 of you all in your family? Was it 5? And I used to go around, being raised as the only child, used to go around, and it used to be fun to me. And they would tell me they wish they were me because I was the only one. But I saw it differently. I would go over somebody's house and about 13 people in there, and they probably were getting on each other's nerves. But to me, it was fun. I just didn't know how they navigated the bathroom when it was time to go to school in the morning. I guess you had to get up early.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I know you said we got the roll, and I still don't feel like I done touched upon anything. But look, you can count on me.
Yeah.
Anytime you want to talk about anything, I'm available.
Yeah. And I'm gonna end the thing, but stay on the line because I want to ask you something when we go off air.
Okay.
Okay. Look, I want to thank everybody for watching the Slim Nation One-on-One podcast today, and with my good friend Louis Bracey from the neighborhood, from IC Norcom, and Friends4Ever. So we'll see you next time with another guest. And thanks for watching. And remember, if you go to our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe to the Slim Nation One-on-Ones podcast page. And if you're watching on Facebook, make sure you like and just share this conversation with others. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.